Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, from Mr. Work, you are a former Marine Corps officer and former Undersecretary of the Navy, so you know a lot about amphibious warships. I have a yes or no question to ask you, but let me preface it by saying I believe they are a necessity to project American influence in regions such as the Asia-Pacific, and I hope you agree. Amphibious ships are versatile, interoperable, and survivable platforms that are able to meet the full range of military and humanitarian missions abroad. I do remain seriously concerned that our Navy may be unable to support all requests for amphibious ship support from our combatant commanders. I secured a provision in the most recent NDAA that calls for the Commandant of the Marine Corps to report to Congress on the number of amphibious ships required for the Marine Corps to execute the President's national security strategy. This committee eagerly awaits the Commandant's findings later this year. Mr. Work, if you are confirmed, will you pledge to meet with me and other members of the committee within 30 days to discuss in plain English the Department of Defense's plan to provide sufficient amphibious ships to execute the full range of operational requirements from the combatant commanders?
Yes, sir, I will.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I look forward to a further conversation.
Sir, if I could make one correction for the record, I am a Marine and a former Undersecretary.
You know, when I was reading that statement, I expected to be challenged, at least in the minds of all the Marines in the audience and within the sound of my voice. So thank you for clarifying that. And if I had seen Senator Roberts on the floor, he would have made that correction also. Now, let me move to Mr. McKeon. There's been some publicity about a letter that Senator Ayotte and I wrote to you on February 20th, citing at the outset a January 29 New York Times report that the Obama administration has known for years about potential Russian violations of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF treaty that bans testing, production, and possession of medium-range missiles. Apparently, American officials believe Russia began conducting flight tests of a new ground-launched cruise missile in violation of the INF treaty as early as 2008. Now, this would have been very helpful information to the Senate when we were discussing the New START treaty in 2010. So Senator Ayotte and I wrote a letter asking in part, as the Senate Armed Services Committee considers your nomination to be Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, we request that you provide the committee with answers to the following questions. Number one, were you aware of any intelligence regarding potential Russian violations of the INF treaty in 2010 when we were considering the new treaty with the Russian Federation, which has apparently violated the previous treaty? Number two, do you believe that the Senate should have been made aware of any potential Russian violations of the INF treaty during consideration of the New START treaty? Number three, do you believe the Senate was made aware of any potential Russian violations of the INF treaty during consideration of the New START treaty? If so, please provide details. And number four, as you know, questions of how to respond to arms control cheating and noncompliance are ultimately policy decisions. 1 year from now, if Russia is not in compliance with this treaty, in your current position or in the position for which you are nominated, do you believe the United States should continue to comply with the older treaty, the INF treaty? And so we sent this to you on February 20 in anticipation of this hearing, and at the close of business yesterday, we still did not have an answer to this letter. Turns out that around 8 p.m. last night, after most staff had left and after the Senate had finished voting and people were on their way home, a letter was delivered to the committee in answer to Senator Ayott's and my letter. It was delivered at the code word security level. And so Senator Ayotte and I are under some very serious constraints in asking you about this letter today. If I were cynical, I would wonder why this letter was not responded to earlier, so that Senator Ayotte and I and our staffs and people with code word security clearance who advise us on this side of the aisle in the committee could thoroughly look at the letter, consider the answers, and ask you questions in a non-classified manner. If I were cynical, I would question the fact that the response was delivered so late and in such a way that we're really not able to get into the answers to our questions in this hearing. But let me just ask you in this way, Mr. McKeon. President Obama recently gave a speech calling for further cuts to our nuclear deterrent. He stated we need to work with Russia on new arms control agreements that go beyond New START levels. Did you play a role in drafting this speech, sir?
Senator, I probably saw drafts of the speech. I think you're referring to the speech that he gave in Berlin during his trip to Germany last June.
Yes, I am.
I probably saw drafts, but and maybe I made comments, but I don't recall with any specificity.
Can you say whether the President knew about these major violations of the arms control agreement as he was, at the same time he was making a speech calling for further cuts and for further working with the Russian Federation on arms control?
I don't know what the President, when the President has been informed of the issue that you've described. I'd have to check on that.
You don't know what the President knew and when he knew it?
That's correct. If I could answer briefly your reference to the letter, I apologize that it got here so late last night. I very much wanted to get it here earlier, and I was coordinating with the committee staff to inform them of our progress to try to get it here. One of the great joys of working in the executive branch as opposed to the legislative branch is you get to coordinate your letters with about 50 people, and the clearance process took longer than I would have liked, and so I apologize that you got the letter so late. What I can say about that issue, sir, is, as you know from the letter, which I hope you've read by now, is that we are concerned about the Russian activity that appears to be inconsistent with the INF Treaty. We've raised this with the Russians. The Russians have come back to us with an answer which we do not consider to be satisfactory, and we've told them the issue is not closed.
When did you raise it with the Russians?
It's been raised with the Russians by several officials over the course, this particular issue that you're referring to, over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, but I don't know the specific dates. I'd have to check on that.
If you can supply that to the committee in a non-classified answer, I would appreciate it. Let me just say, I don't know how whether you can answer this or not based on the letter that you sent, but if you had such information during the context and during the time frame of the 2010 deliberations on the New START Treaty, you would have felt duty-bound to give that information to members of the Senate who are voting on the treaty, would you not?
Sir, as you may recall, during the September of 2010, on the eve of the vote in the Foreign Relations Committee in mid-September, there was an issue that the intelligence community flagged for us and for this committee and the Foreign Relations Committee. And I believe it was literally the day before the committee's vote. And then General Clapper, when he appeared in an all-senators briefing late that month, which was focused primarily on the national intelligence estimate on the IC's ability to monitor New START, raised this issue as well and told the senators that were there in the Senate Security about this issue that had been raised in the middle of September that implicated possibly New START, possibly INF. So I believe, sir, that the IC and the executive branch were committed to providing timely information about potential concerns.
I don't think I can ask you the substance of what was told to the committee, can I, in this setting?
No, I'm afraid not.
Yes, okay.
Now, I understand, General.
You can understand the position that places the committee today.
I do, sir, and I can't really get around it. The information that is involved here is highly classified. As General Clapper said when he was here 2 weeks ago for the threats hearing, and he was asked about this issue, he said a lot less than I did and wanted to defer all of it to a closed session, which I believe you are having later this week. Well,
let me just say that I have very serious concerns about this. And I will alert members of the committee and members of the Senate that I do not believe this committee and this body was provided with all of the information that you had and that we needed to know to cast a fully informed vote on the New START treaty. But we will follow up.